Hello. This week's Torah portion, Bereshit, meaning in the beginning, is the first one in the Torah and begins a new reading cycle. In it, the story of creation is told, concluding with Vayar Elokim et kol asher asa vehine tov me'od. And God saw that everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Unquote. But is the world really very good? We look around us and see wars, death and devastation, hatred and murders, unspeakable evil and atrocities carried out in the name of some ideology, natural disasters such as floods, famine, earthquakes, or tornadoes, accidents galore, senseless deaths, and the like. How can any of this be good? Well, some people believe there is a purpose behind it all, that good things always emerge from bad occurrences and justifies them. That all suffering is for some greater good, whether it's for the individual, the community, the country, the earth, or the universe. Note that all these are not the same. The greater good of a community as a whole might require that some individuals suffer more than others. Others believe it all averages out in the afterlife, in what Judaism calls Olam Haba, the world to come. Let us take a close view at these attitudes. There are two sets of justifications for this position, religious and scientific. From the religious angle, we are told that everything God does is good. In our Torah portion, as we saw, God declares the world very good. The psalmist says, Tov Hashem lakol verachamav al kol ma'asav. The Lord is good to all, and his mercies are all over his works. So, we must have faith that it's all to the good. From the scientific angle, I'm a physicist, we note that nature is always optimizing. One example is the principle of least time. Between 2 points, light takes the path that it can cross in the least time. That is why objects at the bottom of a pool seem closer to the surface than they are. Reflected light follows a broken path. Likewise, soap bubbles form so as to minimize surface area. An oddly shaped metal loop dipped in a soapy solution will be spanned by an odd-looking surface. Of all possible surfaces joining the metal parts, this one has the smallest area. There is also the principle of least action. When an object is subjected to various forces and followed an odd path as a result, that path is the one that minimizes a function called the action. My doctoral dissertation was based on the principle of least action. It's a very powerful insight into the workings of nature. Also, evolution is nature optimizing life. Nature gradually makes changes in the makeup of living things in order to maximize their chances for survival in their environment. So, the thinking goes, why not assume that nature optimizes absolutely everything, including matters where human beings are concerned? This is where the word optimism comes from, the belief that everything that happens is somehow for the best. The German philosopher Leibniz preached that everything is for the best in the best of all possible worlds. He was satirized by Voltaire in his novel called Candide, or Optimism. But one wonders, what function exactly is God optimizing? That is totally unknown. An objection can be quickly made. Why can't we always see the good? Some say, because of our limited understanding. A primitive man in a dentist's chair or a surgeon's stable only knows that he's being hurt. He does not see that it's for his own good. In the Torah, Moses could not see the good either. Quote, Moses returned to God and said, My God, why have you done evil to this people? Why have you sent me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, Pharaoh has done worse to this nation, and you have not saved your people. Unquote. First century Rabbi Nachum ish Gamzu was severely afflicted, yet he was always optimistic. No matter what happened to him or around him, he would say, Gamzu le-tovah. This too is for the good. He always saw a silver lining. The Talmud says, quote, It is related of Nachum of Gamzu that he was blind in both his eyes. His 2 hands and legs were amputated. His whole body was covered with boils, and he was lying in a dilapidated house on a bed whose feet were standing in bowls of water to prevent the ants from crawling onto him. Why was he called Nachum of Gamzu? Because whatever befell him, he would declare Gamzu le-tovah. This too is for the good. Unquote. Rabbi Akiva was a student of his and followed in his footsteps. He used to say, Kol da'avad rahamana litav avad. Everything God does is for the good. The Talmud illustrates this notion with a story from Rabbi Akiva's life. Quote, it was taught in the name of Rabbi Akiva, a man should always accustom himself to say, whatever the All-Merciful does is for the good. As an example, consider the following incident. Rabbi Akiva was once traveling along the road. He came to a certain town and looked for a place to stay, but he was turned away everywhere. He said, whatever the All-Merciful does is for the good. He went and spent the night in an open field. He had with him a rooster to wake him up in the morning, an ass to carry his luggage, and a lamp to study Torah at night. A gust of wind came and blew out the lamp. A weasel came and ate the rooster. A lion came and ate the ass. He said, whatever the All-Merciful does is for the good. That same night, some bandits came and carried off the inhabitants of the town. He said, did I not say to you, whatever the All-Merciful does is all for the good? The light from the lamp or the sounds from the rooster or the ass would have revealed my location to the bandits, and I would have suffered the fate of the town's inhabitants. Unquote. Note that the rabbi said everything is for the good, not for the best. The difference is important. The best could simply mean the least bad of several bad alternatives, but no, they meant positively good, not least bad. Can one always find a silver lining, no matter what tragedies occur around us? Long after the event, one can sometimes say yes, especially when there is plenty of uncertainty. For example, the destruction of the temple led to a Judaism centered on synagogue, prayer, study, and spiritual matters. The diaspora helped us learn new skills from the host countries and prevented the destruction of all the Jews. When some countries were hostile, others were friendly. The various expulsions from Spain and elsewhere led us to seed our knowledge and bring new skills to the world at large and learn from them. The Holocaust led to the world allowing the creation of the State of Israel. The State of Israel may be under perpetual siege and surrounded by implacable enemies, but this keeps the country together, increases the determination to keep the state Jewish, and minimizes intermarriage with Arabs. This avoids an explosion in the number of children with mixed parentage, uncertain identity, little or no Jewish commitments, or even practicing anti-Semitism, and who might annul the law of return. It also relegates internal feuding between secular and religious factions to the backgrounds. Note that the Talmud ascribes the fall of the Second Temple to just such internal feuding, to sinat hinam, or senseless hatred, as it puts it. On the personal level, I can say that without the expulsion from Spain, my parents would not have met, and I would never have existed. If I had not been forced out of Egypt myself, I would never have met my wife, had my children and grandchildren, and led a satisfying life. Some will object and say, even so, it's not worth it. I'm not arguing that it is, just that some might consider it so. It is, of course, a subjective matter. Now, is saying that everything that happens is for the good lead to a fatalistic attitude? That is, does it lead not only to acceptance of bad events, but also to not doing much to counter them before they occur, or to react to them only after they happen? Not necessarily, but for some people, yes, and that is dangerous. Some people argue that when bad things happen to us, it means we did something wrong. But the Torah tells us that that is not always the case. Take slavery in Egypt, for example. God tells Abraham in the book of Genesis, quote, "Know for certain that your offspring will be strangers in a strange land and will be enslaved and afflicted for 400 years." Unquote. It does not state a reason, and none is obvious. So evidently God thought that slavery was necessary and led to some good. But how? And why for so long? There are many possible answers, which I described in another Devar Torah. In brief, slavery was necessary for our protection. Jacob's clan in Israel was an easy target for neighbors, but in Egypt, a superpower protected us, albeit to exploit us. Slavery also allowed us to build up our numbers in safety, to build up our identity and community spirit. We were all in the same boat and followed the same customs. Slavery minimized contact with the outside world, which reduced the practice of idolatry and eliminated the possibility of intermarriage. Slavery created a scenario that allowed God to show the Jews and the whole world who was in charge, as he did when he freed us. Both the gratitude that we felt upon liberation and the slave mentality we had acquired made it easier for us to accept the Torah as God wanted us to. But why couldn't God have made slavery less brutal and more tolerable? Because then few would have wanted to leave. Even as it is, the Midrash tells us that 80% of the Israelites refused to go and died in the plague of darkness. And the rest may have left, but they grumbled incessantly about going back. So in conclusion, yes, it is always possible to find some good things emerging from bad things. In the absence of a definitive answer, looking for the good is not a bad attitude to have, if it does not lead to resignation and passive acceptance. Shabbat Shalom.